Before I get started, though, I wanted to open up for Q&A. This morning I gave a keynote, and when I share my story, people resonate with different parts of it. Some people say like, "Oh, I was that person," or "My son was that person," or "I was in foster care," or "I'm going to be a foster parent," whatever it might be. So I wanted to first give you an opportunity for questions. Does anybody have any questions for me about anything I shared this morning? And rest assured, you will not ask me a question that's too personal or threatening for me. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity before I jump in. Yeah, so do I have a relationship with my biological mother? Sort of. She feels like when you go to a family reunion and you have an aunt, and like, I know we're related, and like, how have you been? Good. Okay. See ya. It's sort of like that. It's real superficial. It's cordial, but it's not deep or meaningful. I spent many years being angry at her because she couldn't offer me what I wanted, what I thought I deserved. And the things she did offer I didn't want, and I thought were unhealthy. And I spent many years being angry at her, wondering if, is today the day you're finally going to learn how to be a mom? And I remember when I was, this is turning into therapy for me, so thank you, this is good. I remember when I was in my 20s, my wife and I had been dating, and we were engaged, and we were going to get married. And this man from my church he was mentoring me, and he knew we were going to get married. And he said, "Adam, hey, do me a favor. Promise me that you won't become a father until you first learn to become a son." And that just really intrigued me. And I thought, like, what? How do you do that? So do I put myself up for adoption or what? And so I was really going back and forth with that. What does that mean? What does that mean? And then so in my religious tradition, there's a sacred text that describes this thing we call God as a father, loving father. And it says, if you ask that loving father for bread, he's not going to give you a rock. And I thought, well, that's fascinating. I need the bread of parenting. I never had that, So that was sort of my meditation, was like, okay, bread of parenting. I'm ready, And the weirdest thing happened. It was like people, women who were older than me and men who were older than me, would just come up to me, and say, weirdest thing, but do you want to come join our family for dinner? We'd love to have you. Would you like to go on vacation with us? And so anyway, I ended up being mothered and fathered or parented by about 3 or 4 different men and 3 or 4 different women, through those years. And I was like, oh, this is what it's like to be a son, there's just this idea that as a child, I never knew what it was like to have an older person that delights in you, right? Like, no, just you the way you are, you light me up. Like, I didn't know what that was. And those men and women were like, oh, Adam, we see so much potential in you. It's such a joy to be. And I didn't know that. So, oh, that's a flavor of what being a son is, right? And so, as I began to receive that from them, I could look at my mom and say, you don't have to be anything to me. You can just be who you are. And I kind of let her off the hook, right? And then that just allowed me to forgive her. And like, you just be who you are. And let's just see how we connect as adults. And it turns out we really don't connect. The more education I got and the more therapy I got, the more I just felt more and more removed from my biological family. So it's cordial, it's superficial, and it's okay. I'm okay with that. So, yeah, thanks for asking. It's a great question. Yeah, thank you. Any other? Yes, please. How did religion come into my life? Well, I can't answer the question about how it came into my life unless I also answer the question how it left my life. It came into my life when I was in my 20s, right? And so in the South, Bible Belt, Texas, here's how religion, a girl. There was this girl that I worked with, and she was cute, man. And so I was kind of checking her out, and she said, "Are you a Christian?" And I'm like, well, if I need to be, sure, right? I mean, if that's step one, then sign me up, And so we started dating. I started going to church and really appreciating this idea that there's this thing called a spirit and a dynamic, and there's a way to make it grow. And in that religious tradition, this is what it looks like. So I really jumped in and started growing in the Christian faith. And then through my 30s, into my 40s, went through a period of deconstructing, where I'm like, I'm not sure. I'll explain my personality later, but I'm a skeptic, right? In the classic sense of the word. There's a saying that says, "In God we trust, and all others must show data." And I'm sort of like that, like I'll trust God, but religion needs to show data. And the data it was showing me didn't add up. And so I pulled back from Christianity as a religion and started looking when I got my doctorate of ministry in pastoral counseling. I went to an ecumenical program and looked, broadly speaking, at all the religions across the world and even secular humanism as a religion, right? And what do people believe and what do they not believe and why do they believe it and where are they the same and where are they most drastically different? And I deconstructed everything about my religious upbringing and landed in a place that is authentically mine. Like it's not religion. I define religion as behaviors that people share to advance their spiritual well-being. Right? That's religion to me. So when I deconstructed all mine and put it all back together, it didn't look like religion anymore. It was much more an individual pursuit than a collective pursuit. Although I think there's value in a shared, not only is there value, it's necessary to share a common journey. But for me, organized religion collectively, I don't do well in it. So I entered into religion because I wanted to date a girl, and then I sort of took off and she went that way. But another girl came in and I married her, right? So 25 years later, it's great. And she's still very traditional Christian. And then over the years, my thing has sort of gone in and out in a way and up and down in ways that really at least confuse people and at worst make them angry. And so I've been okay with that. I don't even remember what your question was, but man, I sure like my answer. Jeez. My meds are wearing off already. Any other questions? These are great. Thank you. Yes? Yeah. My ride was rough. I'm going to tell a story here before we even get to the material. This is going to take me on a tangent, so grab a beer. Maya was light into our family, right? She really was light in the divine sense of light, And that sounds so sexy, right? Like, light, this child you adopt and she's light into your family. Yeah. The problem with light is that it exposes darkness, right? Your house is clean until you get a shiny light and you start really looking at where's the dust. Oh, I thought I cleaned, but I hadn't, right? So Maya comes in and back then I was still in the Christian tradition, pretty much towing the party line. And in that tradition, this may be true in other religions, I don't know, but in Southern Bible Belt Christianity, adoption is sort of like if you adopt, like you're the anointed one, like that's like a gold star, right? You're top brass because you adopted, right? Because that imagery runs all throughout the New Testament, right? So we adopted, and it was sort of like, we're great, I know. And so Maya came in, and it was supposed to be this loving thing where she realizes that we're her family that she never had, and we bond, and everything's wonderful, right? And I remember in the scope of 10 days, literally, in 10 days, my wife and I we were having a cup of coffee one morning, talking about how isn't it going to be great, when the kids are grown and they're married and they're going to bring all their kids back and it's going to be this great big family. So glad we adopted. 10 days later, we were having a conversation where we were saying if we can get her to a high school diploma, that'll be a huge victory. Our expectations changed as she started to decompensate. And we spent most of her teen years in and out of treatment, residential, juvenile, therapists and everything, right? And it was so hard. Well, what happened is that, when you get married, most people, not everybody, but most people, you get married and you realize like, oh, this is what I signed up for, right? And you realize like, oh, till death do us part, whatever, God help us, right? And so that person is not who you thought they were, or they were that person, but they changed and you got to deal with their stuff and then you want to change them and fix them. And then eventually you just say, whatever, I'll just deal with you. And so you learn to pay an emotional price every day in your marriage, right? It's like, man, you don't clean up. Makes me mad, but I'll just pay that emotional check and either clean up after you or learn to deal with it, or you don't know how to manage your emotion, whatever it is, right? And you deal with that. And my wife and I had those things. Her family was pretty dysfunctional, and mine was pretty dysfunctional. We came together, and we had a lot of issues, and you just learn to deal with it. And you're paying this emotional price in marriage. So Maya comes along, and all of a sudden Maya's needs were so huge. And this is why I said what I said at the end of my talk about, if you've never parented a kid with special needs, then you need to, stay in your lane, right? She came along, and that price that we pay emotionally, we call that grace, right? That's grace. I'm going to give you grace, right? Grace costs something, So Maya comes along, and boy, you talk about a grace magnet. Man, that girl needed lots and lots of grace. So she does all these things that bother you, and you just deal with it. Well, the problem was that she drained our grace budget. So we looked at each other and said, you know what? 15 years into it, I'm sick of dealing with you, And my wife and I never had a rocky relationship. We were never at risk of being divorced. But when Maya came, the emotional demand it placed on us as individuals, as adults, left us bankrupt for each other. And we were like, I'm sick of you. I'm sick of pretending like this isn't an issue, and your mom and your family and the in-laws and all that. So we started having it out. And some people would say that at first we thought, well, this is because of Maya, right? But Maya didn't cause the conflict in my marriage. She just exposed. Thus, she was the light, right? Like God is saying, here's light. I'm going to shine and see what's in that marriage there. That sucked. And so I told her, after I remember taking Maya to yet another psychiatric facility, coming home. It was Christmas. It was Christmas Day, I remember, and our family had to drop her off at an inpatient residential treatment center on Christmas Day because she had gone. She was homicidal. And we stopped and had our Christmas dinner at a Love's gas station. And that was our Christmas dinner, and we had cold hot dogs. And it was just one of those moments where you're just like, this sucks, man. Like, there is nothing beautiful or fun or romantic or sexy or spiritual about this. Sucks, right? And it was a low point for our family. And even though we knew at a deep level we were living really, really good lives, it was a tough life, right? And I remember we got home, and my wife and I were just... we were tired and we were done. And I said, I don't see myself ever cheating on you. I don't have that in me. I don't see myself having an affair. I don't see myself leaving you. I can't do that. But you know what I see? I see 20 years from now, me and you being roommates, and our kids are going to come back for the holidays, and we're going to fake it, and we're going to act like we sleep in different bedrooms, and you live your life and I live mine, and then we die. And I said, man, I sure don't want that. I think there's more. And so we got into therapy, and we started dealing with our stuff, and deconstructing our marriage and then reconstructing it and saying, can we forgive each other? Can we grieve because you thought you were signing up for this and I thought I was signing up for that, and we clearly don't have that? Can we grieve what we're now accepting that is not there? And then having grieved it, can we cast a vision for the next 20 years of our life? And it was hard work, but we did it. And now, our marriage is deeper and richer than it's ever been, So the question was about what was it like to adopt Maya? Well, it was hard. It was hard. And when I share the story, ultimately it was beautiful, and it was rich, and it was deep, and it was meaningful, and it was purposeful. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done as a human being. Hands down, even surviving my own abuse, this was much harder than that, because at least I was in control of the healing process for my own stuff, right? But it was so necessary. And then, so then we're thinking, okay, well, we did the hard work. What's in it for us, right? Like, she needs to be a good adaptive citizen. She needs to be grateful, And we wanted something back. And what we got back was the reality that she is living a different life than her mom lived. She didn't, like my bio kids, she didn't auto-admit into a D1 university, She'll probably never go to college. But her mother was 14 years old when she had her. By the time her mother was 21, she had 4 kids in the system. She had a drug problem. She never finished her high school diploma. She was with guys that would beat her and abuse her and her children. you know. And still now, today, her mother never functioned, like is still a crack addict. So Maya is now 19. She got her GED. She does not have a drug problem. She uses cannabis to manage her anxiety, which actually, I know this isn't politically correct, but cannabis in some cases could be an extremely effective intervention for anxiety. She supports herself. She does not have problems with the law. No kids in it. So generationally, she's knocking it out of the park, right? And it took us a while to understand what differentiated instruction really looks like, right? It's where are you starting and how much progress did you make? And she's made huge progress. So it's hard, but it's been really, 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 really meaningful. And the lesson I've learned about love is that how I realized how not good I was at unconditional love. My love was really, really conditional. Like, I'll do this, but here's what I want from you. Versus like the guy on the side of the road that, you know, we'll work for food, and I'm thinking, no, dude, go get a job, man. Crying out loud. Get a job. And then finally, one day, I actually had empathy, and I thought, Adam, you don't know what that guy's story is, right? Yeah, maybe he's trying to hustle you for some crack. Maybe, but maybe not. And you've got a lot of money. Give him $10 freaking, right? It doesn't. You don't need to determine what he does with this between him and God. You just give him the money. That's unconditional, right? And I wasn't doing that with my love for Maya. It was very conditional. And then I realized, oh, we love because it's the right thing to do. We don't say, I'm going to invest love and then this is the return. You just say, I'm going to invest love because it's what I do, right? And so it grew me as a lover, as a person who loves. It grew me tremendously. And I can look at kids now and say, no, I'm just going to love you. I'm not saying I'm good at it. I'm just saying I'm better and more aware than I was. So that's what it was like to adopt a child with special needs. I mean, it destroyed me. It deconstructed my marriage, you know. It exposed ugliness in me that I never wanted to look at. And I wouldn't have it any other way. You know, I'm just so grateful, so grateful that, that we did it. So, great question. Thank you for asking that. What other questions do you have before we jump into the material? Awesome. Okay, so here we go. Social and emotional learning. The EQ intervention. Here's the problem that we're facing, my friends. 20 years ago, when I was doing my postdoc at Brown Medical School, this was the leading edge of mental health intervention. That was the front line. That was Bradley Hospital, psychiatric hospital. When kids came in, we knew it was all hands on deck, and it was cutting edge. I mean, those were kids that were homicidal, suicidal, major depressive disorder, major generalized anxiety disorder, you name it, reactive attachment. And this was a treatment room. That girl's that's probably an OT doing some kind of like sensory integration, stimulation therapy for her. It was cutting edge, right? Still is. But that was the front line of mental health intervention 20 years ago. Fast forward 20 years ago, and whereas that used to be the front lines of mental health intervention, now it's a school. Schools have become the leading edge of mental health intervention. 20 years ago, therapy used to happen in a room like that, treatment. Now it's happening in a classroom. That's this huge shift that's going on. 20% of our kids are experiencing severe, not mild, not moderate, but severe mental disorders, and less than half of them are going to get treatment, right? That's insane. 1 out of 5. And out of that 1 out of 5, less than half are going to get treatment. Can you imagine if we knew as a country that 1 out of 5 teenagers had a medical condition that potentially could be life-threatening and they wouldn't get treatment? Do you think we would tolerate that? Of course not. We would do anything we could do to make sure that they got treatment. But with mental health, it's a different thing. You don't see the symptoms until it's almost too late. So those are the kids that we have coming in. And people ask me all the time when they find out I'm a psychologist, they'll say, hey, Adam, is it me or are we just getting crazier, you know, as a nation? And I say, oh my gosh, we're getting crazier. I mean, there's the frequency, intensity, and duration of psychopathology is creeping down younger and younger and younger ages. And it's not just, oh, these are bad kids that need parents, they don't have parents. It's that, yeah, it's parenting to some, but it's systemic psychopathology, and it's worse than it's ever been. I don't see it getting any better. Here's the deal, though. These kids are showing up into classrooms with teachers that say, I don't feel prepared to deal with mild, not moderate, not severe, even the mild ones. They never train me on that. I mean, I went to school to be a teacher, not a mental professional. And 82% of the teachers said, yes, I get that relationships are important, but I don't know how to do that. Nobody showed me how to build a relationship with a kid that's got major depressive disorder or thought disorder or criminal history. I mean, I don't know what that's like. It's scary to me, understandably. So there's this great discrepancy going on between who teachers are and what they're prepared to do and what we're asking them to do, the emotional load that we're asking, right? So as a result of that, not as a result, but here's what we do with those teachers. We say, yeah, you're right, this is overwhelming. Don't worry though, we have a toolkit for you that will help you deal with these kids. And we put it together, this toolbox back in the 50s. It's carrots and sticks, right? So these kids, these high needy kids, 20% of whom have severe mental illnesses, half of whom are not getting treated. These are all your carrots and these are all your sticks. So let's do positive behavior support. Let's put out all the carrots and make rewards for them. And if that doesn't work, let's suspend them, right? Let's expel them, And what we're finding is that for tier 1 kids, yeah, this still can be effective. You can still do that and get a lot of ground. But there are tier 2 and tier 3 kids, these 20% kids, right, that we talked about. This stuff doesn't mean anything to them. They don't care about your sticker chart. They don't care about your token economy. Suspend me, do whatever, man. I just don't care, right? That's not going to work. And then we have this one really, 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 really big tool that we love to use called SPED. And the deal on SPED is this. If that's your only tool, you will make a lot of kids look like special ed nails that are not special ed nails, right? And we try to qualify them and find a way to make it work, find a way to make, I don't blame anybody for it because you're saying SPED is the only show in town. That's where the help is. We need to get them to the help. So do whatever you have to do to qualify them. Well, as a result, out of our sense of urgency to help kids, we're overqualifying kids, and then that just dilutes the service for kids who legitimately need it, right? Who actually do qualify. And it's a bad deal. It's a bad deal. So what happens then as a result of that dynamic that I'm describing, there's a demand for these people and on these people. We can't find teachers, and when we find them, we place a huge load on them. And they say, I'm done with this, forget it, right? And there's this turnover effect, and that turnover just drives chaos in school systems, and that chaos drives student anxiety, and that student anxiety drives behavior, and that behavior drives anxiety in teachers, and it's just, that's the vicious cycle, right? And the tools we have are not working. So what do we do? Well, SEL is this new tool. I'm going to jump to that. Social and emotional learning. It's this new thing, right? We have tons of data that say, oh, if we can just teach kids to regulate their emotions, good things happen, right? Their aggression decreases, their oppositional behavior decreases, their pro-social interaction increases, their academic achievement increases, and teachers who practice SEL do better work. They become better educators, and they're more sustainable. They can tolerate stress more effectively. So it's a win-win. Kids do better all the way around. Teachers do better all the way around. So out of all the interventions we have, math interventions, language arts interventions, no matter what it is, science, STEM, SEL is as empirically validated as anything. We have tons and tons of data that show if we're going to do SEL, we're in good hands. This is a good thing. It's empirically validated. Okay. So the return is for every dollar that we spend on SEL, we save $11 in remediative services, right? So if we can proactively spend $1 today, that means down the road we're saving $11 in having to remediate kids academically and behaviorally. So it really is preventive. It's proactive, and I love it. I just love it. And not only is it good for schools and good for teachers, but with college degrees becoming more available, kids have more access to college, which is great. The challenge that creates those from an employer perspective, you put out a job for an accountant and you're flooded with diplomas, right? College degrees, you have stacks of applicants. So what those employers are saying is, if I've got 100 kids in the room, young men, and they're all qualified and they all have a college degree, and I don't care whether it was from Harvard or from Phoenix, right? What I want to know is who can sit across from me and look me in the eye and have a good conversation with me? Who can shake my hand? Who can have good customer? That's who I'm going to hire, right? I'll hire the kid with the college, community college degree over the Harvard graduate if they can do that, because you can't teach that, right? So SEL is a great thing all the way across the board. So if we're going to do SEL, this is what it needs to look like. the CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. And it's just this wonderful clearinghouse of all things SEL. And they said, listen, if your school is going to do anything and you're going to call it SEL, 5 things need to be in place. Number 1, you have to be teaching good self-management to kids, or self-awareness. And then once they're aware, they have to be able to self-regulate. They also have to have social awareness or empathy. They have to have social skills or relationship skills. And when you put those 4 things together, that makes good decisions. It leads to responsible decision making. So if we're going to do this great thing called SEL, that's what it needs to look like, which is great. It standardizes what SEL should look like. So let's go forward here. Who are we? Let me tell you a little bit about how we ended up writing an SEL curriculum and why we're doing it. So this is with the Applied EQ group. We are mental health providers, and we figured out about 5 years ago that we're not reaching kids that need help. The kids that need the most help live in families where they don't have insurance. They don't have somebody that can afford to pay $60 a session. They don't have anybody in the family that can say, let me take off work, go pick up my kid, drop them off at your clinic, sit there in your room for an hour, in the waiting room for an hour while they get therapy, drive them back to campus and get back to my work and not get fired, right? Those kids are not being reached, and we knew that. And so we just were frustrated. So we started thinking, what can we do? What can we do to help? What can we do to help? This traditional idea, 20 years ago, yes, it made sense to practice in a clinic, an outpatient clinic, but that model's not working anymore. What can we do systemically? SEL, right? Research shows this is a good thing to do. Let's create an SEL curriculum for teachers, because if we can empower teachers, then man, we can get teachers to do a lot of the work that we're not able to do. And we may never be able, the goal is not to make a teacher into a mental health professional by any stretch, no. But we always say, just as you don't have to be a thoracic surgeon to perform CPR, you don't have to be a mental health provider, a licensed mental health professional to know basic mental health first aid. And sometimes just that basic stuff can help a lot of kids systemically. It can go a long way. That's what SEL is, basically, right? So let's do that. Let's create an SEL curriculum that we can use to train teachers to work with kids and give them some kind of something that's not a carrot and not a stick to ease their anxiety and empower them in classrooms. So we started putting our heads together, doing research about 2 or 3 years ago, looking at SEL. And one of the main things that we saw, one of the most important things that we saw, that we found that was meaningful to us is this. If you're going to do SEL at a campus level or a classroom level or a district level, the most effective programs have to start with adult SEL, right? And so I tell teachers this all the time. I can't teach trig unless I know trig. I can't teach a 5-paragraph theme unless I know how to write a 5-paragraph theme, right? I can't teach SEL unless I know SEL. And here's what I mean by that. So you have a teacher in the classroom. They are understandably overwhelmed and frustrated. 28 kids, it's chaos. Come on, class, be quiet. Come on, everybody. Shh. Hey, listen, y'all, hey, shut up for a minute. Come on, be quiet. Listen, you guys, y'all better shut up right now. You're pissing me off, and we have a lesson on anger management to do right now, so y'all shut up. And that kind of stuff, right? Kids are looking at us, right? And they are learning from us. And so that can be problematic at some level, but it can also be a great thing. Like, oh, since we have that already built into how we live life, kids looking at us and learning from us about what we model. Well, let's take advantage of that, and let's empower ourselves as adults so that we can be living interventions for the kids, because we're already living interventions. We're already modeling, good things and bad things. Hey, let's put our heads together and figure out what it would look like to live a life in front of a child that's an emotionally intelligent life, so that we are mindfully modeling for them adaptive living. Wow, wouldn't that be great? And then when I'm living that life, and then I go and I pick up a printed curriculum and I say, open up to page 22, we're going to learn about anger management. Now, look at the platform I have in those kids' lives, because I'm living this out for them and they're ready to learn. Versus me living a dysregulated life as an adult, stressed out, overwhelmed, toxic, angry, and then saying, all right, everybody shut up. Well, we're going to do an SEL lesson. You better like it, right? Doesn't work that way, So it's got to start with adult SEL. And what I'm going to do in the rest of my time with you is I'm I'm just going to take you into a brief example of what we do with teachers, right? And so our SEL program, it's called the Heart Smart Classroom, and it's a 2-day training. Day 1 is a SEL for adults, and day 2 is SEL for students. So again, we're telling teachers, we're not trying to make you into a mental health professional. We're just trying to give you some mental health first aid tools. So the first thing you need to know, teacher, about dealing with kids that have high emotional needs is this. And this is what you learn day 1 of therapy school, right? When you go to graduate school to be a therapist. When that patient is sitting in your room and they are flailing in the deep end of emotional drama and drowning, and they're going up and down underwater emotionally, your instinct as an empathetic human being is to want to save. I want to rush in and help you, right? And that's what makes a good therapist. But, helper, listen, before you jump into that deep into the swimming pool, you better make dang sure that you have your own flotation device securely fastened and that you have a rope around your waist. And until you have that in place, don't you think about jumping into the deep water with that person, because they're going to suck you under and you're both going to die. That's what being a good therapist is. It's how do you stay grounded in session, right? So that's what we preach to teachers. Man, you see these kids coming in and your heart breaks for them because they got trauma and they've got this and they've got that. Awesome. Man, the worst thing you can do is try to save them. Don't jump into their life and try. Man, they're going to suck you down and you're going to get chewed up and spit out. If you're lucky, you'll last 3 years. So, hey, teacher, we want you to help them, we want you to love them, but do it wisely. And wisely means start with adult SEL. And starting with adult SEL means, oh, I've got to have my own life jacket on. I've got to have my own rope tied around, I've got to have my oxygen mask in place before I help my kid, right? It's that. So we spend a whole day doing that, and then we come back the second day and say, okay, now this is the curriculum. This is what you teach the kids. Now that you know how to live it and regulate it and model it, now you can teach kids. So what I'm going to do for the next 45 minutes or so is give you a taste of what that is like, or that whole day of what that's like, starting with adult SEL. So skip that. Here we go. This is part of the SEL map. So remember, if I'm going to do SEL, there have to be 5 things in place. There has to be self-awareness and self-regulation. What's not on here is empathy, and then social skills, and then good decision making. Those are the 5 pieces. I'm just going to focus on this half of the equation. This is adult SEL right here. That's what we focus on. So number 1, you say, okay, I get it, Adam. It's got to start with adult SEL. I've got to know myself and I've got to regulate myself. But what do I need to know and regulate about myself? Well, here's how it works. I need to know my climate, my weather, and my storms. So my climate is my personality. The weather is my emotions, and the storms are my stress. That's what I need to be aware of, and that's what I need to regulate. And so I was working with my colleagues at A&M in the College of Education around SEL and talking about that. And we started thinking, like, wouldn't it be great if we could create a test that would measure that? There's this saying that in God we trust, all others must show data. What if we had data to show teachers, this is your personality, this is your aptitude for your emotional management, this is your vulnerability to stress? What if we could create a test? So we did. We created a personality test that measures all 3 domains, and it's called the EASL, E-A-S-E-L, and that stands for Educator Assessment of Social and Emotional Learning. So what we do when we do our trainings with teachers is the first thing they do is they get online and they take this test. That I'll show you where to go to take it. It's free. And you get data that shows you this is your personality style, number 1. This is your capacity to regulate your emotions, number 2. And number 3, this is how vulnerable you are to stress. And we use that data to create a BIP for every single teacher. And I tell teachers, man, don't be talking about putting kids on BIPs unless you're on your own, right? And I'm not being condescending or anything, because I tell teachers, dude, I've got a Ph.D. in psychology. I've been a psychologist for 20 years and I'm on a BIP, right? And so if it's good for me, it's good for you. So starting with adult SEL means every adult in the building is on their own BIP. And that's tough medicine to swallow, but it's so necessary, and I'll explain why. So let's jump in and talk about that first thing, the climate. That's the first thing I need to be aware of and regulate. That's the question, where am I in the ocean, right? What ocean means is it's an acronym, and there are 5 questions that drive human behavior, that determine personality. No matter who the person is, where they are, American, European, African, Australian, high SES, low SES, male, female, gay, straight, Christian, agnostic, whoever it is, there are 5 questions that shape our personality, and here they are. Number 1 is, do I prefer change or consistency? Number 2, that's the O, openness. 2, conscientiousness. Do I prefer structure or chaos? Number 3, do I prefer to be alone or with others? E, extroversion. A, agreeableness. Do I prefer cooperation or competition? 5, neuroticism. How quickly am I emotionally aroused? Those 5 questions are the essence of human personality, right? The personality is rooted in those 5 questions. Now, here's the thing about that. This is where self-reflection becomes so important. I don't have time to go into the neuropsychology of it all, but we tend to fear difference. That which is different than me, I'm afraid of, right? And that can be on any demographic variable. If you're different than me in gender, if you're different than me in generation, if you're different than me in culture, in value system, religious ideology, political affiliation, religious affiliation, whatever it is, the more different than you are from me, the more I'm going to be afraid of you. And I'm just take there's a whole neuropsychological lesson in the adaptive function of fear, right? But it's a survival mechanism, because if I don't know you, I can't trust you. And if you're different than me, then certainly I don't know you and I can't trust you. So I carry this mistrust of people who are different than me. And all I have to say is, if you doubt that, then look at a cafeteria. Go into the cafeteria at any room, and what are you going to find? Are you going to find, oh, here's table 1. There is an African-American female. There's a Latino male. There's an upper middle class white boy. There's somebody who's gay. There's somebody who's straight. There's somebody who's trans. All demographic are equally represented. Awesome. Table 2. Oh, look at that. Same thing. And all of our tables are equal. Of course not. Of course not. Birds of a feather. It's that whole axiom. We want to be with our people, right? And that's fine and that's adaptive, but it creates some problems when we need to be diverse, when we need to start interacting with people who are different. That means we have to overcome fears and biases and blind spots, right? That's this introspection. So please trust me when I tell you that you and I really, we fear people that are different, and then when we're really, really lazy, not only do we fear them, but to sort of ease our guilt about being afraid of them, we moralize it so that we can feel more comfortable with the fear that we have of them. And we say, well, yeah, but I'm better than them. People like me are what's right with the world, and people like that are what's wrong with the world. If people could just think what I think and just believe what I believe and just act the way that I act and vote the way that I vote, then everything would be fine, right? So yes, I'm afraid of them. I have to be afraid of them because they're what's wrong with the world and I'm what's right with the world. And my job is to make them like me. That's human nature at its most lazy, okay? That gets us into trouble. And I could spend a day proving that to you, and I'm just going to put that out there and you can choose to believe it or not. But as a licensed psychologist, I think that dynamic is really what drives a lot of the problems that we face. So just take my word for it when I tell you that as a general rule, we don't like people who are different than us. Okay, so let's move forward then. So that where am I in the ocean? Another way to look at that graphic is this. Okay, so people that are high in openness love change. People that are low love consistency. People that are high in conscientiousness love order. People that are low love chaos. People that are high in extroversion love groups. These people love solitude. They love cooperation. They love competition. They love they're reactive emotionally, and they're very stable. Now, here's the deal. If you score high on this, it doesn't mean that you're better than this person. It just means the further you get away from the median, the further you get to extremes, the more likely you are to have some really, really good natural talents, and the more likely you are to have some really, really big blind spots. And the further you go south, the more likely you are to have some really, really good skills and some really, really blind spots. Does that make sense, right? So it's a question of how far away from the extreme are we getting, and then what strengths and weaknesses are associated with those extremes. So let me give you an example. I score very, very high on the conscientiousness scale. I love order. I don't like it when people move my cheese. It pisses me off, right? So don't do that, right? I can get things done. I'm very task-oriented. I can organize. I can sort. I can get things done, right? The people that drive me the craziest are people that score low on the scale, that are chaos, that live in this free-floating sort of, right? And so my best friend, he was best man at my wedding, and I was the best man at his wedding 30 years ago. He scores low on this. He's an artist. He's a songwriter. That's what he writes songs for a living, right? I can't even get that world, right? And he lives in like free-floating sort of, you know, and we've been friends for 30 years, best friends for 30 years, and I'm thinking, we have lunch every week, and I'm thinking like, dude, I know what's going to happen. You're going to freaking text me at 11. We're supposed to be there at 11. You're going to say 11:15, bro, I'm heading out of the house right now. See you soon. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? How do you get into your 50s and you still can't make it to a lunch on time, right? Well, it's because he lives down in this world of chaos, right? So what I'm good at is creating order. What he's good is living in free flow. Like, he's never going to die of an ulcer, right? He can go with the punches. He's real laid back, you know, and he can just take it as it comes. He's never going to get freaked out. So there are some great strengths associated with this and some weaknesses, and there are great strengths and weaknesses. One of my weaknesses is that I will always, almost always, value the completion of a task over a relationship. So I really don't care about you. I care about getting things done. Don't get in my way, because if you get in my way when I'm trying to get things done, it's just going to make me mad, right? And I don't care about you, and I don't care about being mad at you, right? That's problematic. That's very problematic, okay? So that's what I mean when I say we have to know our personality, we have to be able to know what our strengths are and our weaknesses are and regulate that. So let me explain, let me give you an example of how this works out in a classroom. This is very practical. This isn't some kind of abstract philosophical thing or psychological thing. Most elementary school teachers, they cluster here, high on agreeable. Very cooperative, very loving. They love to be together. They love teamwork. They're great team players. They're very emotionally accessible. Secondary teachers score lower. They're less agreeable than primary teachers. And I can show you the data set in my database that show, like I pulled out 2,000 samples of educators, and there was a clear distribution of secondary. I mean, I'm not kidding, right? I have data to show that. So elementary school teacher, you're highly agreeable. I call you the Mary Poppins. You're sugary sweet. The kids know that you love them. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's awesome. Now, highly agreeable teacher, that's what you're good at. What you're not good at is setting boundaries. You don't want to offend anybody. You don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. You just want cooperation. Let's just hold hands and sing Kumbaya, right? Let's feel the love. And I don't want to set a boundary because that's going to rupture the relationship, and I don't want you to be mad at me because I'm a people pleaser, right? I want us to all be, right? So that's the deal. So you have Adam in class, and Adam, so what happens is you've got your kids, and most of them, you know, when they start acting out and they're anxious and moving around and they're getting, you know, jittery, you say, oh, Adam, are you okay? Oh, sweetheart, what can I do to help you? Come, give me a hug. I love you. We're just going to hug those blues away, right? And so 80% of the kids say, that felt so good. Yes, she loves me. That love soothes them, and they're back on track. And you say, see, people like me, we're what's right with the world. If people could just be sweeter. But then you have tier 2 and tier 3 kids, right? And so they're anxious and moving around, and you do your Mary Poppins. Oh, Adam, it looks like you're struggling. What can I do to help you? Well, you can get up out of my face, you, that, right? And so they immediately escalate, and now they're defensive. And you're freaking out because there's tension in the relationship, and you're highly agreeable, and you don't do tension in relationships. So you're thinking, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do? I'll be nice because I'm really good at that. No, Adam, come on. I love you. I care about you. No, yes, really. You know, we can do this. You can, now just what do I need to do to help? You can get up out of my face, you racist, blah, 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 right? Okay. And then now Adam, he doesn't need love. He needs direction. He needs boundary. He needs containment. He needs you to squash it. But you can't do that because you're highly agreeable and you suck at setting boundaries, right? That's the limitation associated with your personality style. So you're trying to Mary Poppins Adam into the best version of himself, but he needs boundaries. He needs containment, you know? And so then I come in as a consultant and say, wow, it looks like Adam's having a tough time in your class. Yeah, he is. Well, I'll tell you. Well, what are you doing to contain him? Because, you know, it looks like he needs some structure, right? Well, you know, I let him know every day that I love him, and I greet him at the door and give him a handshake. Awesome. But what are you doing to set boundaries when he acts out? Well, you know, I give him a hug, and I let him know that I'm there for him. Awesome. But what are you doing to actually contain the behavior? What boundaries are you setting? well, I think he might have ADHD, right? So we might want to start the RTI process because he needs to get to special ed. Maybe, right? Maybe. Maybe you just stink at setting boundaries though, right? And so instead of starting from a place of assuming a within-child deficit and going down that sped paper trail, what if I look within and say, wait, hold on. Maybe there's something about me that needs to change. Maybe I need to grow at setting boundaries. And so what's so great about having this is that like if I'm coaching a teacher and I have her personality profile, I can, it's not me having a mean conversation and saying, you just need to set boundaries. I can say, oh, this is your personality. Remember when we did your personality profile? You're great at loving, and all the kids know that you care about them, but setting boundaries can be hard for you. So here's what I want you to do. Next time, I want you to give that kid choices and say, contain the behavior by saying you can do this or you can do this. So let's just practice that. So again, the great thing about having this personality stuff is that it takes the inside of us and externalizes it, right? So let's say there's something on a high shelf and I need somebody to reach up there and grab it. And I've got somebody that's 6'7" and I've got somebody that's 5 foot. My eyes tell me, get the guy who's 6'7" because that's going to be naturally easy for him. But if there's something under a table and I need somebody to squash under there and get it, I'm not going to get the 6'7" guy. I'm going to get the short guy and say, would you mind reaching under there? It's going to be easy for you, right? Because my eyes tell me this is what you have and this is what they're going to be good at and this is what they're not going to be good at. It's like an x-ray of our soul and it says, oh, let's externalize it. This is what you're going to be good at. This is what you're not going to be good at. Be aware of that, and then once you're aware of it, regulate it. That's adult SEL. So what we do with our teachers is we have a laminated sheet of that map, and they put it on their door right here, and they take a thumbtack, and they put where they are on the map. So I would put my thing right up here, high order, and that's right there. That's like my picture. That's my personality. And it's a reminder every time I walk out the door, oh, I'm highly conscientious. Oh, that means I'm going to be able to get things done. Oh, it also means that I might also lose relationships because I'm so task-oriented, right? So we externalize that in the classroom so the teacher begins to increase their self-awareness. And then, and this is the hard part, so this is another example of why it's so important for us to know our personality. I'm highly conscientious. I get things done. So last summer in August, the AC went out in our clinic, and I'm in Texas, right? And so you don't mess around with no AC in Texas. People think that if you're from Texas, you can tolerate the heat. We're wimps, man. We live in AC. Like our sidewalks are air conditioned because we can't take it, And so, in August is a busy time for me. I'm on the road. Well, my clinical director, Jeremy, called and said, or texted and said, Adam, bad news. The AC went out in Suite A. And I said, oh, bummer. Okay, well, hey, I'm on it, right? I can get things done because I'm highly conscientious. So I called the AC people. Need you guys to get out there. They get out there. They fix it by the end of the afternoon. Awesome. See, people like me are what's right with the world, people who can get things done. So then a couple of days later, it was the next day, Jeremy says, Adam, so sorry to bother you, but the AC's out again. And I said, no. We just fixed it. So I called those AC people and I said, hey, you guys need to get out there and fix it, for crying out loud. We've already been through this. So they get out there and they say, okay, Adam, we tried to patch it. The patch didn't work. You need a new unit. 10 grand. Okay, just do what you need to do, but fix it, right? Okay, great. So 3 days later, we've got a new system installed. Everything worked great for 4 hours, right? And then Jeremy calls and says, Adam, you're not going to believe it. The new system is broken. And so I said, dude, get out there now and fix it, right? This is silly. So they get out there and finally, like after a week of all of this, they fix it. And meanwhile, the therapists are trying to do therapy in these hot rooms with the windows open and hot air. It was miserable. So the next week I got home, Jeremy and I are just having our staffing. And I said, man, I'm glad we got the AC fixed. Yeah, me too. Because people like me are what's right with the world. I can get things done. So he said, I wonder how the therapist felt that week. And I told him, I said, I don't know how they felt, but I know how they should have felt. They should have felt grateful that they had somebody like me that could get things done. Thank God, right? And he kind of chuckled and said, okay, I wonder how else they might have felt. And I said, oh, that. And I said, well, I guess they felt frustrated. Yeah, great. What else? Well, maybe they were angry. Okay, good. He said, do you think we could do anything to show them some love? I said, yeah. So I went out and bought a bottle of wine for all the therapists. Each one got a bottle of wine, and each one got a $100 gift card to a spa. And I put it on their desk and wrote them a note and said, hey, man, thanks for hanging in there. We love you, appreciate you. Be well. And they loved it. It was great, you know. So peace was restored in the land. But here, all of that is to say, if I had just said, you know what, hey man, I'm highly conscientious. I just get things done. I don't care how you feel. I'm going to get things done. That's just my personality. Deal with it. Can you imagine what kind of organization I would have if I was leading from that model? Can you imagine what kind of classroom I would have if I said, I don't care. I'm just here to teach. I get things done. They don't pay me to build relationships. Whatever. Oh my gosh. It's just not going to work, right? So it's me understanding my personality, knowing what my strengths and weaknesses are, and then having a guy like Jeremy who says, hey, Adam, is it possible that you're valuing the completion of a task over the completion of a relationship in this? Or that you're not valuing relationships enough? How do you need to be different? So we train our teachers to start asking each other hard questions. That's your personality. You've got to put up in your classroom. What questions do people need to be asking you to keep you in your sweet spot, right? And that's hard work. It's not easy to do, but that's what brings out the best in me. So that's the first thing is I've got to know and regulate my personality. If you're wondering what your personality is, there's a code there. And if you scan that code, it will take you to our website and you can take the easel for free. So all you do is you log on, you put your email in, and you click. There's 120 items, and then it will email you a report with all the results. And it said, this is your personality style, these are your strengths, these are your weaknesses, these are things you can do to grow. And so my publisher said we have to lock it down in 6 months, but until then it's free. So log on and take it. So that's the first thing we do. We want to do SEL because we know research validates it. Great. Well, it's got to start with adult SEL. Great. So that means that I, as the adult, have to know my personality, my emotions, and my stress. I have to be aware of them, and I have to regulate them. So this is an example of what that looks like. This is how I actually begin to increase my self-awareness and my capacity for self-regulation. This is where my BIP begins. Okay. Any other questions about the personality test? Okay. So let's go to the next one. We talked about regulating our personality. Now let's talk about stress. What do I need to know and be aware of stress? Let's see here. Let's move forward. I want you to do this. Now that we're talking about stress, I want you to write down 3 things in your professional life that are stressing you and 3 things in your personal life. So again, if I want to be effective with my students that are drowning and flailing in the deep end of the emotional pool, I've got to have my own life preserver on. I've got to have a rope tied around my waist. Self-awareness and self-regulation are the life vest and the rope. Starting with my personality, I got to know my personality, my strengths and my weaknesses. Then I go to my stress. Oh my gosh, this is where I act a fool. I act a fool. You take any person, you take a person with a Ph.D. in psychology who's been at it for 20 years, and on the right day, I can act a fool, right? Anybody can act a fool. So I want to know what my stress is, and I want to be mindful of it and regulate it so that I can reduce the occurrences of my foolish behavior. What is stress? It's energy. That's really all it is. Stress is just energy that our bodies produce when we wonder whether we can deal effectively with a given situation. Basically, these dragons that you've identified, these 6 things, 3 at work, 3 at home, you're scared of them. You don't know if you can deal effectively with them. And so your body, interpreting that emotion called fear, is giving you this gift. And the gift is energy in the form of stress hormones, right? Your body is saying, here's a bunch of cortisol and here's a bunch of adrenaline. You're going to need this energy to attack that thing that's scaring you. That's called the classic fight or flight. So you've got 3 dragons at work, 3 dragons at home. You're afraid of them. You don't know if you can deal effectively. In that fight or flight, your body is dumping all of this energy into you to be adaptive. So what happens is if we've been in that stage for long enough, we go from stressed out to burned out. 3 dimensions: exhaustion, cynicism, and ineffectiveness. And I knew I was getting here into my 2nd year as a school psychologist. My first year, I struggled hugely with imposter syndrome, right? I was right out of graduate school, had my Ph.D., and I was excited, but I didn't think I knew enough to be effective. And I responded to the imposter syndrome by burning the midnight oil, right? I was just going to work long hours so that nobody would figure out I had no clue what I was doing, right? And into my second year, I just couldn't sustain it anymore. I couldn't keep it up. I was so burned out. And I remember about this time into my second year, I had slept all through the winter break, literally slept like most of the day. And I just felt sad about it. Like, man, that's not how I wanted to spend my break. But I must have needed the rest. So, okay, I'm good to go, right? It's January. Well, that lasted 2 days, and by the third day, I was depleted again. So then I started, Starbucks, Red Bull, just to get going. And so I was chronically exhausted, and then I was cynical. It's like, why? I don't want to go to that campus. They're not going to, that place is a sinking ship. This whole thing is like rearranging furniture on the Titanic. Why bother? They're not going to listen to what I say. These parents don't care. These administrators don't care. These teachers don't care. Whatever. I was just really cynical. And then the third one was I was ineffective. Even when I could muscle up some energy and get past my cynicism, I wasn't doing good work. Into year 2. And I knew I was in trouble. And so I started looking ahead, right? I wanted to work in schools. I loved the work. But I started looking ahead at teachers and educators that were about to retire. I was in my mid-30s and they were in their mid-60s, early 60s. And they fit into 2 groups. There were life givers and life suckers, right? And the life givers in education were the sweetest, kindest, most loving people that you'd ever want to be around, man. They were just incredible. And I always wanted to be around them, And you just knew that they had run the race well, that they had gotten through education with grace and dignity and power and had really, really done it well. And then there were life suckers that were just counting down, literally marking off days on their calendar to free at last. And they were the most miserable, toxic, crusty, angry, bitter, pissed off people you'd ever want to avoid. And they were working with kids, for crying out loud. And I remember thinking, like, are you kidding me? How did you get there, man? How do you live a life where you end up at that stage in the game that unfunctional and that dysfunctional, and you're just hoping for the best at that point? And I thought, oh my gosh, Adam, look at where you're at now and connect the dots. Where do you think you're going to end up? And I was headed right for the life suckers. I was going to be that guy, just bitter and frustrated and cynical. And I thought, man, I don't want to do that. I want to work in schools, but I don't want to be that. And that's when I realized you're burning out. This is not sustainable. You need to think of something different. So then I started looking at strategies around stress management and self-care. So that's really where all this came from. It started with me and my own need. So once that becomes my normal, I mean, we have days and even weeks where that's our normal, but when I'm living that semester after semester and then year after year, that's a huge check engine light. That means pull it over and take care of business under the hood because it's not good. So here's what I use this slide with my athletes all the time. Stress is absolutely necessary for me to live the best version of my life. My best me happens embedded in stress. Here's the challenge though. If I don't have enough stress, then I'm going to live a life of rust out. This is a life of complacency. That's me living a safe life, right? And I'm just going to tread water, and hope for the best. I'm never going to really challenge myself. Minimum daily requirements, and I can deal with that. There's no stress. The good news is that I'm never going to die of an ulcer if I'm living this life. The bad news is this is not the best version of me. This does not represent peak performance. Then I start adding stress, and then my performance goes up. But the problem is that is a real slippery slope, right? So just enough stress, and then you're this burned out match over here. And then that's bad. You're dealing with stress, but you're not, again, at peak performance. So the question is, what do I do to stay right here in the sweet spot? This is where I want to be. I want to ride this wave of stress so that I'm right here at my peak performance. And again, this is where the BIP comes in handy. So I'm going to give you some strategies that will help keep you right where you need to be so that you understand stress is this fuel that will continually float you to the top of your best self. So instead of engaging or fight or flight, I put engage or disengage. And I'm going to talk through strategies about engaging and disengaging in ways that are helpful and hurtful. So let's look at the first one. This is me using that energy that my body is giving me because I'm scared of these 6 dragons in ways that are helpful. Number one, I want to be connected. It's like the thing in Cheers. Sometimes you want to know where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came. I want to work where somebody knows my name and hopefully they're glad that I came, you know. One of the worst things I can do in my job is to do it in isolation. I don't want to do that. I want to be connected with other people because that goes a long, long way, and we'll talk more about that later. I want to anticipate and think ahead. What do I need to do to make the first 5 minutes of my day most effective, to set myself up for a successful day? What do I need to do for the first hour, for the morning? What do I need to do to set this first day up of the week to build a good, successful week? How can I make this first week of the month create a successful month? How can this first month of the semester be a foundation for a good semester and then year, right? So you're always thinking ahead, how can I be prepared to set myself up? One of the worst things we can do is say, I don't know, I'll figure it out when I get there, right? You got a lesson plan. How are you going to teach the kids? I don't know, figure it out when I get there. That kind of thinking, right, I'll figure it out when I get there, sets me up for dysfunction. So I want to be connected. I want to anticipate. I want to redirect the energy. At the end of the day, my body is flushed, is putting all this energy in me. I got to work out. I got to flush this energy out of my system and do 20 minutes of exercise so that when I lay down and go to bed at night, I can actually initiate the circadian rhythm. I can actually start getting the sleep that my body needs. But if I'm not working out and redirecting the energy, then what happens is I lay down at bed at night and all this energy is bouncing through my body and my thoughts are racing, and did I send that email, and what about this, and what about that, and what about this, and what about that? And next thing I know, I look at my clock and it's 3:15 a.m. and then I panic, right? And then I fall asleep out of sheer exhaustion. 15 minutes later, my alarm clock's going off. I wake up in a panic. First stop on the way to work, Starbucks, right? Nitro cold brew is my new thing. So this adrenal system that's already overstimulated, I artificially stimulate it more with caffeine. And that's just a recipe for physical dysfunction. Last one, assert yourself appropriately. Know when to say when. Know when to say at the end of the day, I'm done. I'm done. Sometimes that will come at 6 p.m. Sometimes it might come at midnight. But for the most part, know when to say when. And sometimes 8 a.m., 9 a.m., or 9 p.m. And you just say, you know what? I am unemployed until 7:30 a.m. tomorrow, right? And I don't ever advocate for depending on chemicals for any kind of long-term coping. And when I say chemicals, I'm talking about like crack cocaine. I'm talking about cannabis. I'm talking about alcohol. I'm talking about sugar. I'm talking about processed wheat, gluten, all those things we turn to kind of soothe, right? It's okay for the short term, but long run, it leads to dysfunction. Having said that, if you go into my pantry, right-hand side of the pantry, second shelf, you'll find a bottle of Patron Extra Añejo, right, tequila. And my wife knows there are days when I come home and I'm pouring a little tequila and I tell her I'm unemployed until tomorrow. And 10 years ago, I started with this protocol. I'm going to ignore my phone and I'm going to ignore my email until 8 a.m. And this is a huge, huge risk, but I'm going to see if the sun comes up tomorrow. We'll just see. I may break the whole system, right, by shutting down. Let's just see. 10 years later, man, the weirdest thing, I woke up today and the sun came up. I haven't broken anything, right? But all of that is about setting boundaries and just knowing when you're like, I'm done. You've got to be able to assert yourself. So this is me. I'm taking all this energy. I'm engaging in ways that are helpful. This makes me stronger and it makes the dragon weaker. I can also disengage in ways that are helpful. Self-observation, and that's exactly what we're doing in this workshop. Asking myself, what am I doing to contribute to the problem? How is this about my fear? How is this about my insecurity? How is this tapping some part of my personality that I'm just not good at and I don't want to admit it, right? That kind of work is really, really powerful. So with me, first-year school psychologist, self-observation, instead of saying, Adam, quit blaming the district, quit blaming the campus, quit blaming the kids, quit blaming your special ed director, quit blaming the superintendent, stop and practice self-observation. What are you scared of, Adam? What is your fear? What is your limitation? How does this have to do with you at some level still being afraid that you're the poor Mexican kid that's never going to fit in and never be good enough and has to be the smartest guy in the room with all the answers? Why don't you deal with that for a little bit, Adam? Oh, now that sucks, right? But unless I'm willing to do that work of personal reflection, I'm always going to be projecting it outside. Well, it's these people, it's those people, it's the Republicans, it's the Democrat, it's the White House, it's the Christians, it's the Jews, it's the gays, it's the straights, right? It's always me blaming, which is me giving control, rather than taking power over my own life. But if I'm not practicing self-observation, I'm not going to do that. And then the second one is keep perspective. And that means ask yourself, in the grand scheme of things, how big a deal is this really? This thing that I'm so scared of at school, and this thing that I'm so scared of at home, a week from now, how big a deal will it be? A month from now, how big a deal will it be? A year from now, how big a deal will it be? And for me, most of the times, I rarely get past a week that I'm even remembering what was scaring me so much. There are times where you get a phone call from a doctor, right? And it's like, nope, this could be a very, very significant thing a year from now. Those are major league stressors, right? And that warrants attention. But for me, most of the things that I get, they're just like little chihuahuas nipping at my heel. And I freak out about that and I start catastrophizing, right? So I want to keep perspective and just make sure that I'm not losing track of the big picture. So I'm stressed out, I'm overwhelmed, life is asking me to do all these things, I've got all this energy. If I fight this way and if I run this way, it's a win-win. I get stronger and the dragon gets weaker. This requires self-awareness and it requires self-regulation. I can use that same energy in ways that are hurtful. So what do? I'm stressed out, I'm overwhelmed. I attack, I blame, I criticize others. I cause dissension among staff, I triangulate, I do all this nasty ego defense mechanism stuff that we do in our dark moments, right? I remember one of the most naive thoughts I ever had as a 19-year-old young man working as a dishwasher at a fast food restaurant. It was this: I can't wait until I get a college degree, because when I get a college degree, I'm going to go out into the real world, I'm going to get a real job, and I get to leave all this drama behind me. Can you believe I thought that, right? Fast forward 20 years, and I'm sitting in my first faculty meeting with a Ph.D. in psychology, right? And I was on a campus that had been through 5 years of the grinder. This campus on the district was the campus where teachers went to die, right? Nobody wanted to work there. That was where you got sent for being punished, and the only people they could hire were teachers that couldn't find a job anywhere else. It was miserable. And oh my gosh, the drama. And I'm not talking about from the kids. I'm talking about at an adult level. People throwing each other under the bus and saying mean things and talking behind each other's back and all the nastiness and the pettiness. And the kids knew that, and they were like sharks to blood with stuff like that. And so then they would start triangulating the staff and like, pues órale, miss, why can't you be cool like Miss So-and-so? She lets me do this. She does. Well, blah, blah, blah. And they start getting mad at each other, and then the kids are saying, bingo, right? Now I've got you where I want you. Y'all are mad at each other, and I can do what I want because you're not focused on me. You're focused on how much you hate each other, right? And then you think that in that thing where the kids are running the show, that I'm going to come in and do a workshop on positive behavior support, and that's going to fix the issue? No, it just doesn't work that way. So clearly there needs to be an intervention in place, but it's an adult-focused intervention at that point. So that's how this thing right here can really, really throw us off the track at a campus level, even at a classroom level. When I get stressed out and I'm not practicing adult SEL, I'm not aware of my stress and regulating my stress, this is what I do, right? This is what we do in our dark moments. And it teaches kids maladaptive behavior. Then I can also disengage in ways that are not helpful. What do? I deny, I rationalize, it's not my fault, whatever, I don't care. And it's like I say, I in that model say, I'm just going to tread water. And there's this line in the district, and if I go below that line, I'll get fired. They won't put up with it. But I can get pretty low, right? And then they're going to put me on a growth plan. I still have another year, and I can still be horrible. But eventually they're going to fire me. So let me figure out where that is. And then wherever that line is, I'm going to hover just above that line of suck, right? And I'm going to do that and hover above suck for 30 years until I'm eligible for retirement. And then I can finally start living my life, right? And man, like if that's what I'm doing to cope with my stress, is just giving the minimum amount of daily work, I'm done. I'm done. It's just not going to be helpful. So I want to be engaged. So you can see, again, it's the same stress energy. I'm scared by these things, these 6 dragons that I have on my plate. Well, if I take that energy and engage in ways that are helpful, then it's great. It's a win-win. I can disengage in ways that are helpful, but I can take that same energy and disengage in ways that are hurtful. Okay. So I've been going really, really fast. We've got about 20 minutes left. And what I want to do is just stop and give you a chance to give me questions. I've gone through this very, very quickly. So let me give you the big picture again. We're at a crisis in education, not just in education. Every industry is at a crisis, but certainly in education. And the crisis is this. Kids' emotional needs are doing this, and teachers' level of preparedness is doing this, right? And there's this gap, there's this discrepancy between what the kids need emotionally and where we're at. And we know that the tools that we've used historically are not effective. Carrots, it's not a carrot and stick problem. It's an SEL problem, or at least that's the beginning of it. So great, let's do SEL because research says that it's a good thing to do. Great, so how do we do it? Well, it's got to start with adults. It's got to start with adults being self-aware and self-regulated. And when I can do that work as an adult, it's great because it allows me to manage my stress more effectively. It allows me to be more aware of myself and what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. It allows me to team with others in a way that's powerful and meaningful so that we can bring out the best versions of each other and rise to the occasion. And so it starts with me knowing my personality and my stress. And when I can do all that personal work, I become a better human being, not just a better teacher, but a better human being. I become a better spouse, a better mother, a better father, a better daughter, a better son. It's a great, great thing, and it starts with me. It's not easy work, but here's the deal. Do you really think, and I've been in education for 20 years now, do you really think that we, 5 years from now, in 2025, are going to look back and say, thank God we made it through 2020. Wasn't that just the biggest pit, 2020? But man, here we are 5 years later and things are so much better. We finally figured out who we needed in the White House. We finally figured out how our national education agencies need to run. We finally figured out how money needs to be distributed in the education system to make it work. And thank God we're doing so much better now. It's really easy. Sometimes I actually get bored at my job. Do you really think that's going to happen? I don't know what you think, I don't. And I'm not trying to be a naysayer or gloom and doom. I'm just trying to be a realist. And I'm thinking, this may be as easy as education ever is, but the corollary is that this may be as easy as banking ever is, or real estate, or being a mental health provider ever is, right? It's never going to get easier. So the question is, well, what's the point? If it's not going to get easier, are you being a nihilist, Adam? No, I'm not. I'm saying, I don't think anything out there is going to get easier. But here's the hope, I can get better. I can become a better version of me, and the better version of me in 5 years will be much more empowered to deal with the more difficult life that I will be asked to live, right? And so I become a better version of myself to meet the demand, and that makes me sustainable. So the demands are going to increase, and rather than trying to put this out or change this or think that something's going to change the broad fabric of society that makes teaching easier, instead of thinking that, I'm going to rise to the occasion and do everything I can do to be the absolute best version of myself. And if the best version of me, as I interface with those increasing demands, we'll see how that goes. And then I can make a decision at that point about who I need to be when I grow up. But not until I've done the self-work to become the best version of me, should I really start thinking about whether I want to do something else. So let me stop there. That's the big picture. I've gone very, very fast through all these slides. What questions do you have for me about this? Comments, insights, concerns? Adam, yeah, but this, or this? Anything at all? Yeah, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. Again, I apologize. I know you're not a code person. Just email me, adam@adamsaenz.com. This will take you to information at our website, but that's my email. And just say, hey, Adam, I saw you at the FIE, whatever, interested in SEL, and I'll send you a book and some curriculum samples, and we just want to set you up for success. Yeah, ma'am, did you have a question up front? Nope? Yes? Yeah. Awesome. Hey, listen, man, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Again, my life is living proof that what you do matters, that the work that you're doing relationally to connect with your students, it will not return to you void. You may never see the fruit of that labor, but it's not in vain. Thank you. Have a great, great afternoon.